Writing a philosophy paper is not like writing any other kind of paper you've probably ever written. Let's begin with the fact that philosophy is not an empirical science. We don't, for example, conduct a whole bunch of murders to find out if murder is immoral. We don't tell a whole lot of lies to find out if lying is immoral. There's no way to test truth tables against anything except themselves, and so forth. It's not something that you're going to collect evidence to support your position on. You might want to find illustrations that agree with your position. You may find that referring to someone who's made the point you're trying to make in a clearer way than you can is a worthwhile endeavor. But for the most part, we don't care about your research. We don't care about the beauty of the language. We're not trying to persuade anyone of anything. So it's not a research paper. It's not a persuasive paper. It's not a historiography paper. What it is an argument. Now, by argument, I don't mean two people yelling at each other. An argument in philosophy is a collection of sentences, the truth of one of which, and we call that sentence the conclusion, is supposed to follow from the truths listed above it. Now, if those truths follow because of the analysis of the structure of the sentences and the definitions of the terms in the sentences, we refer to it as a deductive argument. This is what philosophy tends to rest on. Inductive arguments, that is, arguments which are based on probabilities, on collecting evidence, on making generalizations, developing natural laws. Well, as I say, philosophy sort of passed this all on to the sciences, and that's okay. We're all happy about that. So, what I want to do is discuss 5 short papers. 2 I have written as sort of samples for you to see what a good paper looks like, and 3 bad papers written by classmates of yours from 10, 12 years ago when I first started at PHSC. Rest assured, you didn't write this paper. Your best friend didn't write this paper. Quite likely, your older sister didn't write this paper. Maybe a parent wrote it. Let's hope not. Okay. Let's start with the 2 good papers. So if you'll go to the link on the modules, if you've got the module list up in front of you, you'll see there's a choice. Link to sample papers, good and bad. Click on that. Then we're going to take a look at the first sample paper. It's labeled adultery.pdf. Okay? You can either open it onto your reader, or you can click on the little picture image at the end of the line and it will pull up the PDF in a reader on the browser. When I first started teaching at PHSC about 10 years ago, Gallup had just done a poll indicating what people thought was moral and immoral. And one of the things almost everyone thought was immoral was adultery. So I took it on myself to write a paper arguing that at least sometimes adultery can be moral. Now, if you'll take a look, you'll see that that's exactly my topic sentence of the whole thing. Adultery can be moral under certain circumstances, because that's all of the paper topics you're going to be given are going to be paper topics where there's an absolute conclusion that I expect you to draw. It may not be morality. It may have to do with something like free will. It may have to do with something like knowledge. It may have to do with something like the importance of being able to reason your way to a conclusion. But whatever it is, there's going to be an answer, and you're expected to give an affirmative answer or a negative answer clearly stated. And if I were you, that would be my very first sentence. Now, I have said adultery can be moral under certain circumstances, and then I tell what I'm going to do. as you go forward in life and you're writing papers, what you find will be very useful is you tell people what you're going to do. Then you do it, and then you tell people what it is you did. Okay? So first of all, you're saying, I'm going to do this thing, so everybody can look at what you're going to do and say, okay, it worked or it didn't. Then you do it, and everybody goes, okay, it worked or it didn't. And then you tell them what you did in a way that indicates you understand what you did. Anybody can write things that make them sound thoughtful. The key, though, is actually thinking. All right, now let's take a look at my sample here. I say I'm going to defend this conclusion referring to the principle of utilitarianism. Now, I'm going to define that term a little later, but right now, I'm not ready to do that. That's each thing in its own place. And I say because utilitarianism considers individual instances, I'm going to state an individual instance. So again, if whatever you may be talking about, as I say, free will, truth and falsehood, morality or immorality, beauty or not beauty, any of these questions, you're going to find that sometimes the principle you're referring to covers everything. Other times, the principle is only going to cover particular instances, or maybe not so much cover particular instances as refer to particular instances. So, having said that, utilitarianism is something that refers to a particular instance. So I tell a story. The story, in its shortest form, you've got it, you can read it, is there is a woman who gets involved with a man who's not her husband in order to get information to permit the local people to overthrow the oppressive army government that's been placed over them and return freedom and happiness to everybody abroad, even though it brings great stress to the relationship between the woman who has the affair and the husband. Utilitarianism, as I say here, and I quote John Stuart Mill, one of the founders of utilitarianism, who says that what we're talking about in utilitarianism is creating the most happiness possible. And when I'm talking about happiness, I'm talking about creating the most pleasure possible. Now, there's no question that this woman, in the end, is miserable. The man whom she has the affair with is miserable. It's quite probable that the husband is also miserable. But everybody else, well, not everybody else, of course, there's the oppressing army, but they're gone. They really don't care. Not much anyway. Everybody else is happy. So it's not about your happiness, utilitarianism. It's about happiness in the world. Have you made more happiness or less happiness? If you're making more happiness, you're moral. You're making less happiness, you're immoral. This woman, in having this affair, has made more happiness in the world than if she had not had this affair. Therefore, she has done the moral thing according to utilitarianism. And that's exactly what I say in the paper, in those words. A little more detail, of course. Detail's always good. Detail is useful. It shows you understand what you're talking about. And that's your goal here, is to illustrate to me you understand the principle you're referring to, whether it's pragmatism or it's utilitarianism or it's voluntarism, whatever set of principles you may be using. What I'm looking to see is, do you really understand what you're doing, or are you just plugging in terms and hoping it all works out? Well, we'll talk about the problem of other minds in one of the classes. But that's what I'm trying to do. Discern, do you have a mind? And if you do, what's it doing? And the only thing I can do is look at the evidence you give me. And that's what this paper is. Okay, let's take a look at the second paper. The second paper deals with another thing that's universally, well, not universally, but pretty doggone widely accepted nowadays, and that is divorce. I pose a case. I say there's a couple that's been married for 20 years, and during this time, instead of growing closer together, they've grown further apart. Their jobs have taken them in different directions. Their life as a whole has become essentially two people who live in the same house, see each other a couple hours a week, and go on vacations once a year. They look at each other and go, maybe we could find more happiness if we called this thing off. And so they get a divorce. As I say, most people, certainly the law, recognizes divorce as a perfectly good thing to do. But there is a case that can be made that divorce is immoral, and I make that case here. Under the Kantian categorical imperative, again, this is a key term I'm going to define later, divorce is immoral. Now, at this point, I want to define divorce. I could wait till later, but I went ahead and did it now because I think it's important in order to understand the argument as we go forward that we have divorce defined up front. Divorce means ending a marriage through legal means. Now, a marriage is created by a wedding, and a wedding is an occasion where people make promises to one another. So a divorce is breaking a promise through legal means. Legal means really doesn't matter. What matters to Kant is that a promise is being broken. And I'll go on now to say marriage, just to illustrate some points about what marriage is. Marriage creates obligations. It creates relationships. It creates expectations that do not exist before the marriage. So the marriage is a real change in the world. A lot of people say, a marriage is just, a marriage license is just a piece of paper. No, it's not. It is a legal document. It's a lot like saying, my driver's license is just a little card. Try driving without one. You wind up with the cops in your lap. You'll find that it ain't just a little card. Okay? It's a big deal. So too is a marriage license. Things happen at a wedding. Things change. Now, change happens because of a promise each makes to the other. A promise is a guarantee of behavior. Promise breaking gradually erodes at the value of promises. What's like this? Kant has three formulations of his categorical imperative. Number one says, act so that the maxim of your action can be taken as universal law. Now, by universal law here, I don't mean a legislation, but rather that it is something that applies all the time in all situations. A logically consistent law. So, keeping a promise is logically consistent. I keep a promise, you keep a promise. We each know if I make a promise to you that I will come through. You make a promise to me, we don't come through. You will come through. Promise breaking, on the other hand, says, promises, schmomises. I'll keep it or I won't. It's up to me, not up to you. There's no guarantee. It's not at all. It erodes the making of promises. It does away with promises. In fact, nobody makes a promise. If everybody knows that a promise is just as likely to be broken as not, why would you make one? Why would you accept one? It's an empty guarantee. So promise breaking means that promise breaking will go away. There'll be no more promise breaking happening because there's not going to be any promises being made. And you can't break a promise if nobody's willing to make or take a promise. We take a look at the second formulation. Treat others as ends in themselves and not means only. All we're saying here is realize that everybody has their own goals in life. Everyone is on their own travel through life. Everyone has their own purposes, meaning, dignity, etc. When I just break a promise whenever I feel like it, I'm not treating you as an individual with dignity. I'm not showing you respect. I am not seeing that you are an end with a place you're going all your own. I'm just using you as my means to get what I want. And that, says Kant, is immoral. And lastly, we take a look at his third formulation, which is, you are both sovereign and subject of the kingdom of ends. Well, look, the whole purpose of promise making is to get somebody else to guarantee something, right? If they've guaranteed it and you're not going to hold up your end of the deal, then you're not acting as sovereign and subject. You're just saying, I'm handing out the rules. Everybody else lives by them. I don't have to. The rules you make are the rules you have to live by, the same as everybody else has to live by. That is what Kant is at. And divorce, by being a breaking of a promise, is saying, I can come and go as I please. What is this whole marriage thing about? It's nothing. But it isn't nothing. As we've already seen above, it's something. Things change. Marriage makes a difference. Divorce makes a difference. But the grounds for divorce, the method of divorce, is breaking a promise. And any promise breaking violates the categorical imperative, and as such is immoral. Okay, now those are two examples that are actually, if I say so myself, halfway decent, worth taking a look at. Let's take a look at some bad ones so you can understand why they're bad. Raised the question here about sexual reassignment surgery. A few years back, this was not as commonly, people weren't as commonly aware of it, wasn't as commonly accepted. So I wanted to put out a challenge and raise the question. Is sexual reassignment surgery moral? And the first person says here, sexual reassignment surgery is moral. The choice to have a change in sex is the person's right alone. Well, who else's right would it be? This sentence says nothing. It simply says, I have a right because I have a right. No help. Also, if the person has gender identity disorder and they wanted to have the procedure, it should be their choice. Why? There are all sorts of things I want in life that aren't my choice to make. Why is this something that's my choice? A choice is an act to pick by preference. Okay, they have provided a definition of choice, but they haven't told me why choice is morally important. They've simply said, you have choices. Well, yay, I have choices. I can choose chocolate over vanilla. That's not a moral choice. I am the only person who can choose chocolate or vanilla for me because I'm paying. Where's the morality? Nothing is solved. Sexual reassignment surgery is not just surgery, but a choice. Still not getting anywhere. The Constitution allows citizens to have rights. Okay. The Constitution is not a moral principle. The Constitution is founded on a moral theory. I suggest natural law theory. But the Constitution itself is not a moral theory. Referring to the Constitution is still not explaining to me why anything is moral or immoral. Again, all we have to do is look at the original version of the Constitution, which turned slaves into 3/5 of a person instead of a whole person, which turned slaves into slaves instead of freeing them, took the right to vote away from women. And let's not forget that at the time the Constitution initially was written, it took the vote away from people who didn't own so much property. Were all those things moral? I don't think so. The Constitution doesn't make anything moral. It only states what's legal. And what is legal is not always moral. Anyway, that goes on to make more mistakes like that. But let's not worry about those. Let's take a look at another paper. Example number 2. Person is told they have inoperable cancer that will lead to an excruciating, humiliating death. Would it be moral for that person to commit suicide? Why or why not? The writer says, for the majority of the world, most of us never have to deal with terminal illness. A terminal illness is one that leads to death. As everyone dies, and the vast majority of people die from some illness or another, not from accident, not from murder, not from suicide even, but rather illness, kidney failure, heart failure, brain strokes, whatever. It's not at all rare for us to have to deal with terminal illness. In fact, all of us, with a few exceptions, as I say, accident victims, war victims, almost all of us actually have to deal with terminal illness. So here's a factual statement that's wrong at the very outset. That's a big deal. Don't say anything you don't know. Don't say anything you can't prove. If you're going to make a factual claim like that, provide a resource. So, but the argument doesn't hinge on this factual claim anyway, so why bother making it at all? For that, the majority of the world should be thankful. Why? I mean, first of all, it's false. Second of all, why should I be thankful? Why is this a big deal? It must be the most world-shattering experience to lay in the hospital bed and be told you only have 6 months to live. How about 5 months? You think that's more shattering? What about 3? What's happening here is somebody's trying to persuade me of something and not offer me an argument. Offer me a lot of emotional content to get me excited, but not offer me any meat and potatoes argument. Premises, conclusion. Moral principle, clear definition, leading to a conclusion. Moral or immoral. Just rambling on about what emotionally seems to affect this person about people dying. Every breath feels greater, blah, 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 blah. Forget it all. It's just babble. It's padding. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't forward the argument. Now, we arrive at Dr. Jack Kevorkian was a doctor in the 1990s. Well, Dr. Jack Kevorkian was a doctor in the 1950s as well. He was a doctor for a very long time. And he began his program of euthanasia machines well before the 1990s. Again, if you're going to make a factual claim, make sure it's founded in some resource that you can tell me what it is. He created a way for people to die. Yes, he did. He was not prosecuted because there was no law against it at the time. Later on, a law was passed and he was sentenced to a year, blah, 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 blah. Who cares? It has nothing to do with morality. I haven't heard a single argument of a moral principle yet. He goes on to say, in the Constitution is not a moral document. It's a legal document. Useless. States that a person has a natural right to do whatever they want with their body as long as it doesn't affect anyone else or someone else's property. No. Get a copy of the Constitution. All I got to do, open another tab, Google U.S. Constitution. It'll give you the whole thing. It'll take you about 5-10 minutes at most to read. Nowhere does it say anything like that in it. Now, John Stuart Mill, in his book on liberty, does say that your right, your freedom to act, move, whatever, ends where it violates someone else's freedom. Thus, I cannot willy-nilly fling my arms around if I might slap you in the face doing so. My right to move my arm does not include giving you pain. But that's John Stuart Mill. It's the Constitution. It's a utilitarian position. I don't hear anything. All right. He goes on to say, John Stuart Mill argues in his essay, yes he does, that liberty is the power of an individual to make choices. Yes. So what? Is liberty moral or immoral? Tell me, please. He says any choice that cripples a person from making more choices should be avoided. But is it immoral or not? That's the question. It is a person's natural right to do whatever they want with their body. No, it isn't. For example, as I said a minute ago, I cannot swing my fist and hit you in the face and go, oh, I was being moral. No, I wasn't. I did a wrong thing on all kinds of grounds. Legal, moral, aesthetic even. So Mill doesn't say that. And it's just plain not true. Under no circumstances does that make it moral. Wait a minute. If you have a natural right, that is what makes something moral under natural law theory. Under utilitarianism, it doesn't. But under utilitarianism, the whole notion of a natural right makes no difference. Committing suicide is selfish and immoral at best. Selfish? Who cares? Why is that wrong? I have no idea. No explanation is given. It's immoral. Why? Why is it immoral? I haven't heard why anything is immoral, let alone suicide. To be in the situation where all one has to look forward to is suffering and pain, then I think the person has a right to be as immoral as they want. How can you have the right to be wrong? Now, that's not to say that being wrong is immoral, but it is to say that you can't have a right to do the wrong thing, because if you have a right to do the wrong thing and you have a right to do the right thing, then you don't have any moral principle at all. The whole purpose of moral principles is to choose between moral things and immoral things. That's why it exists, to make that call. They've done away with it entirely. This is a terrible, terrible paper. Now the next paper again is suicide. Same subject, same question. It's either moral or immoral depending on the point of view of a person. Well, duh. And the reasons that have led someone to that point. If a patient is told that he or she has cancer that will lead to an excruciating death, would it be moral for the patient to commit suicide? Moral means of pertaining to or concern. No. A moral principle is what's at issue here. It's not of saying, well, as this definition says, it's concerned with the principle or rules that enable us to choose between right and wrong. No. What you're supposed to be doing is giving me a rule that you're going to use to determine right from wrong. So don't make this mistake. I've been standing in front of classrooms for right at 35 years. And always I tell people, when you're going to tell me why something is moral, what you're doing is telling me what the moral principle is. I told this person that, this is what I got back. Don't you do that. State your moral principle. You're going to get a whole section on moral principles, a lecture, a reading, a handout, as it were. So concentrate on that. You can't go wrong, okay? It is not the right to take a life, but it is not a right to let an injured creature die painfully. Why? Why is it not? Why? Just saying it doesn't make it so. If it did, I'd have $1 million in the bank. I got $1 million in the bank. I don't have $1 million in the bank. Saying it doesn't make it so. Presenting a case, a definition, an explanation, that is what will make it so. I am told here that the act of suicide is to escape something someone finds hard to deal with. I'm pretty sure there's lots of other things that are also ways of doing that. Having a nervous breakdown, assuming a new identity, any number of things that aren't suicide. But peace, let's go ahead. What someone deems as a reasonable reason to kill himself differs from other people. Okay? We have more than one different view about what might justify a suicide. Explain why one account works and another account doesn't. How many people would disagree that if an already suffering paper should be spared? How many people would disagree? Who cares? Morality is not an opinion poll. Morality is a principle. A real quick story. Some years ago, I was teaching at Tennessee State University, and I'm talking about basically the plot of the movie Little Man Tate. Jodie Foster, Diane Wiest. A young boy is brilliant. He's gifted. He's a genius. He can do anything he wants. He can cure cancer. He can write concerti. He can make the world a better place in so many ways, but only if he gets the right education, which the single mother cannot provide. Now, in the movie, they find a happy ending, but in my story, I go, well, so what do you do? So I look out into the room and I see this woman just crying. I mean, just tears running down her cheeks, like she's been peeling onions or watching The Notebook. I go, what's the matter? And she says, look, I'm a utilitarian, and I believe that the most happiness is going to be created by taking that little boy away from his mother. And that just breaks my heart. Morality isn't easy. It isn't an opinion poll. It isn't making people happy. It isn't of necessity. It isn't about making yourself happy, surely. It's about behaving in accord with a moral principle. And what a whole bunch of people think doesn't matter. Okay? Again, just skipping on down. It takes courage to kill something, and so it takes courage to kill oneself. After telling us it's immoral all the way through to the end, it's got courage, it's virtuous, thoroughly mangled, completely inconsistent. It's the kind of thing you want to avoid. Now, I have one last example. This example deals with marriage being immoral. Is marriage always morally acceptable? Now, I'm told, depending on who you ask, marriage could be accepted as both moral or immoral. There's more than one point of view in the world. We've accepted that as an outset. Now, it may well be that one of those points of view is wrong. Some things are wrong. People make wrong choices, wrong decisions. That's called immoral. But there's 2 points of view on marriage. Okay, I'll accept it. It says, to me, either marriage is okay. Oh, I guess he's trying to say either marriage is okay, whether with a man and a woman or with the same sex. Who cares about you? No one asked your opinion. What you were asked is it moral or not? Why? Explain your answer. People are truly happy and in love. What a person does in their private life should be just that. Why? Why? What makes it? I find it to be moral. I get the same idiot definition of morality, moral, being applied to morality. Again, don't give me that, please. Okay? Give me a moral principle. I get no moral principle at all. Now, marriage, it says, is defined in 2 parts: the state of being united to a person of the opposite sex, or the state of being united to a person of the same sex. Okay. What makes either of those unions moral? That's all. I agree with those definitions. Again, who cares? This is not about what you agree to regarding a definition. What it is about is, here's a principle, here's a definition. Does the definition and the principle come together to form your conclusion? Yes. Then you've given me a good argument, and I love it, regardless of what that conclusion is. You don't have to go worrying, well, what does he think? What I think is a good argument gets full points. Bad argument gets penalized. Conclusions themselves, what they are, content-wise, I don't care, as long as they tie back to the premises that you've given me at the outset. Personally, who am I to judge? Bah! Who am I to judge? You are exactly a judging machine. That's what you do constantly, every moment of every day. You judge whether this is safe to do. You judge whether this is dangerous to do. Is this the right thing to do? Is it the wrong thing to do? Is it the safe thing to do? Is it the unsafe thing to do? Judging is all you do. To suddenly go, oh, I can't judge this, is to be absurd. Now, in an article written by Christine Vestal, same-sex couples weren't allowed to get married anywhere. Who cares? Getting married is a legal issue. Getting married is a legal issue. Let's say that again. Getting married is a legal issue. Whether or not someone should get married is a moral issue. That isn't discussed. Why one might legalize same-sex marriage isn't discussed. Only that it happens some places. And now, of course, since then, it's become the law of the land. All same-sex marriages happen anywhere and everywhere in this country. It says the only marriages I strongly disagree with and find utterly immoral are marriages between an adult male or female with an underage child, or marriages between relatives. And that's the end of the paper. No explanation of why those are immoral. Moral principle, definitions, logical connections, conclusions. That's what you're looking for. That's your paper. This is nonsense. Okay? Okay. Now, what I suggest, you write at least one draft. You submit that draft to me. I will send it back as quickly as I can. You will be able to finish that draft and submit it before the end of the semester easily. Okay? Whatever you send to me, I will give you what you need to fix it. Now, it may require a lot, and you may fail to fix it properly. So you may want to send it back to me one more time after you think you fixed it, before you turn it in. Once you put it in the Dropbox to be graded, it's done. So all previous submissions to being graded, previous to going in the Dropbox, should be emailed to me using the email for the class or my direct campus email, adamsjo@phsc.edu. That's adamsjo@phsc.edu. Either way, don't take for granted that you can write philosophically. Maybe you can. Maybe you're going to be safe. Maybe it's all going to work out great for you. But what will it hurt to send the draft, have me send it back and go, brilliant, wonderful, new Kant.